Hello, everyone, and happy third Thursday. We are so excited to have you here with us, whether you are a new or returning viewer. My name is Lauren, and I'm from the college events team, and I'm really looking forward to hosting today's first third Thursday of 2022. Let's jump into a few housekeeping items right away. Today's event has closed captioning in English. To turn on closed captioning, please press the CC icon at the bottom of your toolbar. This event is being recorded and the recording will be available on the Third Thursday website in the coming days. We really encourage you to use the chat and engage with the Algonquin College community throughout today's presentation. And we have some really incredible speakers joining us today, and we'll be taking questions after their talk. So get them ready and you can submit them through the Q&A tab again along the bottom of your toolbar. Today's Third Thursday is all about sparking our creativity. And we are so happy to be joined by co-founder and leader of Salt, a boutique design studio in Ottawa and senior designer at Shopify, Daniela Chavez Ackermann, and Marissa Cordo, staff designer at Shopify. So Third Thursdays are all about sparking ideas and creating community here at Algonquin College. Every month we hear from experts and innovators who share their stories and inspire and empower us to be the best we can be, no matter what that looks like. Tim, let's play the video and help share the philosophy behind Third Thursdays.
College, we're launching the 5th season of Third Thursday. Third Thursdays are conversations that spark ideas and create community. Every month, we invite local experts and innovators to share stories that inspire and empower listeners. Tune in on the third Thursday of every month from your home. We challenge you to change your space into a place, and we'll bring inspiring innovators from inspiring places to you virtually. Let's explore this new reality together. Students, employees, alumni, and community partners forge meaningful connections while learning from each other. The Third Thursday community is story-driven, curious, and collaborative, and we're not afraid of perspective shifts or pushing the envelope. We skip the small talk and dig deep into topics that matter. We're here to fuel dreams through dialogue and turn passion into purpose. Come and be a part of the story.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
It's so nice to be here. It's super nice to be here. I'm very excited to be part of Thursday. Thank you very much for having us. Marissa and I are going to be talking to you guys today a little bit of kind of like our creative journeys and how things have been going ever since sort of leaving. I actually am a graduate of Algonquin, so ever since leaving our respective colleges and then where we are today, and hopefully sharing a few insights to everybody who might be here with us today, whether you're a student or not a student and are just interested in kind of listening to us talk about creative careers and challenges and so on. So just to go in with a little bit of an intro, I'm going to introduce Marissa, who's with us today. So Marissa is actually a staff designer at Shopify. We both are. We worked on the employee experience team, which is the internal team that shapes company culture through design and creates employee experiences that are filled with surprise, delight, and joy. She's also the creator of the Loneliness Project, which you should absolutely check out. And the Loneliness Project is a personal passion project that collects and shares stories about loneliness. She's thousands of stories from all around the world. In an attempt to destigmatize loneliness, combat isolation, and cultivate compassion. The project was named an official Webby Award nominee, and it was recently the subject of the CBC radio documentary, which you should, again, absolutely check out. And it was hosted, co-written, and co-produced by Marissa herself. Prior to joining Shopify, she worked as an independent creative in Toronto, where she's worked with clients that include HarperCollins, Sedler, Marriott, and York University. Her award-winning work has been featured in BuzzFeed, The Guardian, and the Toronto Star, amongst other publications. And I am just absolutely stoked to call her my friend and my colleague. And if you would like to check out her work, I'm sure we'll be posting the link on the chat, but her work is available at marissacorda.com.
Thanks, Danny. It is now my turn to introduce Danny. So Dani, my incredible colleague, is a senior designer at Shopify, where she's worked with the culture and employee experience teams to craft design products and experiences that aim to surprise and delight her fellow employees. Before joining Shopify, she co-founded and led Salt, an awesome boutique design studio in Ottawa that focuses on branding and packaging. Driven by the belief that art, humanity, and individuality have an indispensable role to play in the world of commerce, Salt aims to bring playfulness, boldness, and practicality to the design solutions of large and small clients alike. Dani sees design as a mighty tool in helping people land their dreams, ideally adding beauty to the world in the process. She has taught web techniques at Algonquin, so some of you may or may not know her, and has been invited several times to speak on design entrepreneurship. Her work has received awards from the RGD, Applied Arts, and the ADCC, and I highly recommend going and lurking her work at noknives.ca. I think the link has also been posted in the chat.
And so today, basically to entertain y'all and hopefully share some insightful information, we're going to essentially be doing a little bit of a back and forth Q&A, sharing a few of our stories, anecdotes, and some of our work, and then later answering any questions that you might want to ask us. So I think Marissa's going to kick off the first question, so I will hand it over to you, Marissa.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems like an appropriate place to start to ask you about how, what's your creative history? How did you get into design as a career?
Totally. So my design journey is a little less than obvious. So I studied geography after school. My whole life I wanted to be a marine scientist. I was always into the sciences. My kind of like life goal was to be a National Geographic photographer. And that landed me on, through that. I studied geography, but I really wanted to go into the photography field. And so Photoshop now, so making a design. I started a musician. If anybody didn't require posters and artwork, that's kind of how my graphic design journey started officially. I started making posters. People started asking me how much I charged for them, and I realized that there was potentially a career here for me. And so I ended up consulting with David Bromley, who was at the time the program coordinator at Algonquin for graphic design, and receiving a lot of encouragement from him after he'd seen my portfolio is how I decided to apply, and it ended up being kind of like the best move I ever made for my career. I absolutely loved it. I'm so thrilled to be a part of the field, and it's been a discovery. Looking back at how I was in school, it seems like something I should have always kind of noticed. I was always the one who was kind of fixing my friends' homework to make it look pretty, and like doing the word art like and designing little tattoos for them that I would pay for my recess candy. And so looking back on it, it really should have been obvious, but I don't know whether it was just a lack of maybe professional guidance. Like my school was very much orientated towards academia and sciences and like business sort of thing. And so it was never made obvious to me that there was very much a technical art career available out there for me. So yeah, only during my second round through university, or after I finished geography at Ottawa-U, that I landed at Algonquin graphic design. And like I said, best move I ever made.
I love that.
And right back at you.
Yeah,
about your story.
Well, it's so funny because I feel like until we started kind of going through and like talking about this stuff more, I think we actually have quite similar trajectories into design, which is funny because I feel like we both have kind of slightly more unconventional ways into the field, like in terms that, we didn't go into it straight out of high school. So I also, I was always really into art, design. We had a pretty good art program in my high school. I didn't go to an arts high school, but we had access to a lot of different art classes, and I took a lot of art classes throughout high school. I even took one called design, which was kind of this hilarious class because it was design fundamentals and principles, but also we would paint everything. We didn't touch computers at all. We would just paint typography projects with acrylics. I think our design teacher had not been a practicing designer for quite a long time. But yeah, I loved it. I would take all these classes in high school. I really loved art, but I was creative in high school. I would also do drama, and I really loved, theater, and thought maybe I'll go into theater, maybe I'll go into art. But in the end, like my high school was one of those schools that was kind of like, you can be an engineer, you can be a teacher, you can be, you know, and art is a very nice hobby, but it's not a real job and you won't make any money. And like, it just wasn't ever put in front of me like a thing that I could do for my actual career. So I ended up going to McMaster for like a general humanities degree. I was going to study culture studies and French. And then my first year I was there, they had this class called like multimedia technology or something. I don't remember what it was called, but it was basically Photoshop. And the projects were like learning Photoshop principles and doing a, you know, typographic collage and doing a book cover design. And like, I would just neglect all my other homework and only work on these projects till, you know, 4 or 5 in the morning. I would spend all night working on them, not because, you know, I had left it till the night before, but just because I was having so much fun with them. And it was like I just wanted to spend all my time doing these kinds of projects. And eventually someone was like, you know, you can just do that as a career. It's called being a graphic designer. And so yeah, like wild. And so I ended up putting together a portfolio halfway through the year, interviewing at a couple of different schools with like no backup plan. Like I basically pulled out of McMaster, didn't really have a backup plan. I applied to OCAD in York Sheridan and luckily got in. And so I ended up switching and restarting my degree at York Sheridan. And that was it.
Yeah, it's wild. And it kind of ties into the next question, which is whether this is expected. Because for two people who really didn't even know design was an option, I think people's perception of what graphic design might be can often be very different of field actually involved. So did it end up being what you expected? What did you expect when you started?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I honestly, like, I look back and I'm not really sure what I expected design to be. You know, I think like when I decided to quit my first degree and switch into a design degree, I don't know if I really had any expectations. I was like, well, I don't really like this degree that I'm doing, and I really like Photoshop, so I guess it's better than what I'm currently doing. And I think I thought it would be like, I remember at the time being very confused about the difference between graphic design and advertising, and figuring that I would kind of just like figure it out. And they end up being very different. And I'm glad I didn't pick an advertising program and picked a design program, because they are quite different. And I think I wouldn't have really enjoyed doing advertising very much. I think being in school, I sort of had an idea that there was going to be a lot more almost like specialization within the field. Like, I think I thought, you know, you could be a type design, like it would be more common than it is to be like a type designer, or to be a package designer, or to be a book designer. And like, while I think those are like certainly still careers that people specialize into, I think it's a lot more common than I realized to have to be sort of a bit of a jack of all trades. Like, we've both worked on book design, package design, type design, illustration. You kind of do a little bit of a lot of things. I find most graphic designers do anyway. And I think I was expecting it a little bit to be like my classes in school, where, you know, I'd have my type design course, I'd have my book design course, and I'd deliver a book at the end of it. And yeah, I think that is definitely different than my expectations. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's actually funny you brought it to, I had kind of like some thoughts that were already circulating, but he brought a lot of ideas into my head about kind of what the expectations are in terms of specialization. Because, I mean, for me, when I first started, I guess partially because of the context of how I got into design, I thought, you know, logos, t-shirts, posters, like that, you know, I think a lot of kids get into design like that, because that's kind of like the cool stuff that you're seeing, and you're like, oh, I just want to make drawings and like put them on t-shirts, and like that's kind of the career. And then you get in, and then there's the typography course, and there's the, you know, like a print production course, and there's editorial, and there's layout, and there's the web, and on and on and on. And I definitely, at no point in preparing to enter this course did I realize just like the breadth of different disciplines that are involved even within design. And I remember when I first joined Algonquin, when I joined Algonquin, they had first stopped dividing. Like in second year, you used to choose whether you're going to specialize in digital or print. So if you were to go down the print specialty, can't think of the word right now, but like down that train, you were focusing more on your packaging projects, on print prep, on layout, and all that stuff. And they sort of stopped it because at the time, Shopify was getting started. Everybody was like onto the web side of things. Like the career was heavily starting to orient itself to prepping kids to like be on the website, be on the digital side, like motion and development and all those kind of skills were becoming more of a priority. To the point where we heard so often, like when Jared, who is my business partner at Salt and was also my classmate at the time, when we would say we wanted to more of a print, an old timey kind of like print, like brand oriented studio, they were like, work is really hard there. Like print is dead kind of thing.
Yeah.
Print is not dead. And it's not, it absolutely is not. And I think we've seen that, it's been what, like we graduated in 2015. So however many years, it's been like almost 10 years since we started school. And we've seen that print is by no means that. And there's like a revaluing of some skills that maybe we're starting to be perceived as like being important. But I do agree with you that like, it is a lot more challenging to be someone who dedicates themselves fully to that, fully to being a packaging designer, fully to being a print designer. Like you do need to, for the most part, unless you're, like one of those like supreme specialty, like talented, like this is my jam and this is my style, and I've flexed it to such a point where that is what I'm recognized as. And either you run a freelance practice or work at a studio that fully like embraces that. For the most part, you need to be a jack of all trades. You at least need to be, like knowledgeable enough to be able to talk about the digital side of things or the web side of things or whatever. And so, and that's definitely see how there's value to seeing graphic design more as like design thinking and like recognizing that the true value, I think, of a designer is like the creativity and like problem solving abilities that they bring to a project. And then like if they're able to execute on that visually, that's phenomenal. Or if they're able to like bring the right people in for a particular project, that's also phenomenal, and like fulfill more of an art director role. As well as, be able to talk to the developer or whatever else. So I guess bringing it back to the question, it's just like, not what I expected. And there's more to know from just like, designers and making which I still got to do and has still been phenomenal. But it's just like one small part of what being a graphic designer is all about ultimately.
Yeah. And I think like another thing too is that something school really didn't prepare me for, and that I just didn't anticipate how big of a part of my career it was going to be, is all of the skills that kind of like wrap around design, that facilitate design, that aren't design. Like, if you're going to be a creative entrepreneur, like you do need to know things about business. You need to have a business sense. You're going to need to give yourself, a crash course into taxes and estimating and budgeting and client relationships and timelines and, balancing workload and all of those kinds of things that, at least like, I don't know about Algonquin, but in York Sheridan, like we didn't really talk about that. We barely even talked about, things like copyright and, like let alone the importance of tracking your hours so that you know what rate to charge for future projects. And I think all of that stuff is a lot more important than I thought it would be, because that's how you make money as a creative. And another thing too is I think just like the soft skills of project management, being able to, talk to clients, build trust with clients, like all of that is an incredibly important part of the career, and strategic thinking as well, like being able to, do that really important strategy piece at the beginning of a project is something that I didn't really learn in school, but have learned sort of like on the job over the course of my career.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. I mean, how often have we joked that we end up being therapists for our clients? Like sometimes more intensely than depending on the client, but 100%. There's the whole human relationship side of things, selling yourself, like pitching concepts, a lot more. Like I said, a lot more than anybody imagines. So if anybody out in the audience is thinking of being a graphic designer, this is the reality of it. There's a lot more to it. And we are lucky to cover a lot of that in school. And we have business courses and so on and so forth. And that's amazing. But yeah, definitely like, it's just, it's very cool to be able to talk to a graphic designer, go into the field, because that's when you start realizing, okay, like this is actually what it involves. And to me, it only makes it all the more fascinating. But yeah, it's just,
it's never dull. Like that's certainly something I'll say, like you're constantly being challenged in this career in a way that, like, for me, I love. Like I would never want to do anything else. So okay, let's go to the next question. Like, we're talking about school a little bit and looking back, into the older, earlier parts of our careers. Like, how do you feel when you look back on old work?
Excellent question. And it's actually funny. We were kind of having a little bit of a trip down memory lane. I often end up doing that, when you want to tidy up and like clean house, and then you end up stumbling across old projects, and then of course the tidying up gets left by the way because you just like end up looking at everything you're pulling out. It's really fun for me to look at old projects, partially to cringe. Like there's some stuff where you're like, oh my gosh, if I like really called myself a graphic, like I have an old business card from like before in school when I was starting to make posters.
Oh my God, I would love to see that.
I'm gonna show it. I'm like, how? Like, how is this a thing? This should be burned. Unbelievable. So confident. Like title with a graphic designer. Like,
love
yeah,
it.
100%. That's what I am. Horrible. Like I would never put anything else like that today. But at the same time, I'm like, there's some sense of hierarchy and like structure here. Like my margins are tight and like the grid is there, and I didn't even know anything yet. So like whenever it's nice to see this old work, like to some extent, even though I would rip it to shirt, stands, and like I can see why maybe like I got into this in the first place. And so yeah, and then most recently I had this little bit of, again, like I was saying, I was tidying up some stuff at home and just like getting rid of stuff and looking at some of my graduation projects, which again, I was, you kind of think of it as like really old work, and you're like, oh my God, it's gonna just be like, oh, what was I thinking? This is actually, I would show this, like this is actually still pretty nice. Wouldn't say the same thing again, like I said, to the projects from before I started school, but it's mix. It's a mix of cringe factor and like a little bit of sense of like, I'm happy to see how I've evolved and like continue to learn, and like the lessons that have come along the way to continue pushing the work further. Because if you weren't cringing at old work, then that would be a little worrisome. Like, it's like, okay, well, I haven't really made any steps forward since back then. So it's a bit of mix. It's a big mix of feelings, but I still invent them, and I will, though I might cringe really aggressively at some of my projects, I'm happy that I've kept them, and I'm able to back. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel totally the same way. Like, I think I still feel a little bit of that cringe when I look back at some old projects, but like you said, like, I think that's important. Like, I want to look back at that work and feel kind of cringy because it means that I'm better now. Like I'm better at my craft than I used to be. Like that's the point. That's the goal. That's how I always want to be. I always want to be getting better. I hope that, in 10 years from now, I look back on the work that I'm doing now and think like, oh God, like that's so, I hope that I'm noticing all of the things in my work in 10 years from now that I don't notice now to improve.
Yeah.
And 10 years from that and 10 years from that. And so I think like, if the goal is always to be getting better, like I hope that I feel a little bit cringy, but also, I don't know, like when I look back at my old work, I also do, especially schoolwork, which in some ways is the most cringy because it's my oldest work. Like I feel so fond of that work. I look back on it and just feel like, I don't know, like you said, it's so fun. Like I love looking through it. There are certainly like, especially things with typography and colors that I'm like, like I'd improve that now. Like if I was giving a critique about that, I'd probably, say some stuff. But also, first of all, like when I look back on that, I have to remember like the design trends and like design standards, which do color the way you look at your work, like they do change over time. So who knows if I'd feel the same way if it was actually 10 years ago and I was looking through it with 10-year ago eyes, with like the trends and everything that came with, you know, it being 2000 and whatever it was, 2011, 2012. But also like there's some good stuff in there. Like I look back on it and I'm like, oh, some of the concepts are really cool. Some of the thinking's really neat. Like I remember when I was in school, you know, I made this like package design project that where the box was the toy. Like it was like a little stove that was like packaged inside itself. So it was like a cardboard box and it had like plastic, like little plush foods and like a pot and stuff, and you could cook, like play cook on the top of the stove, and then it would fold down into a picnic, so you could like cook on the stove and then it would fold down. And I'm like, you know, I'd probably execute that differently now, but I look back on that and I'm like, that was still a good idea. Like that was cool. That's a cool toy. So I don't know, it's fun. I think like I would say to everybody who's a designer, like archive all your old work. It's so fun to look through it.
Definitely.
Like, get a million hard drives, back it up in multiple places. Like if you lose your old work, it's sad.
Yeah. And the old work, and then it's just like the fondness of it all, I think also just ties to the fact that there's so much room to play when you're in school. You know, you don't get that kind of time often when you're doing paid work. It's just not a reality. And like you're also working with someone else's tastes and like, you know, requirements and so on and so forth. And so yeah, looking back on some of the work, it's like that's old Danny thinking. That's I see where you were coming from, you know. So there's it's really, really nice to be able to look back on that. Super good to keep. It's a good trip down memory lane there. So that's a special time when you're doing those projects.
Yeah, 100%.
Do more self-initiated work.
I know.
To do that. So moving on to the next one, I would like to know about your first real job in the industry and what that was like and how you look back on that.
Yeah. Oh, so I mean, my first real job in the industry was like an incredible experience. So I was really lucky out of school to get a job at a small boutique studio here in Toronto. They're called Leslie Inc. And I remember actually when I graduated, like one of my professors at our grad show, I told him that I was going to be working there. And he was like, you know, you could do better than working at like such a tiny, dinky, like small place. You could go work at a big agency. And I remember being like, what a weird comment, because I specifically wanted to go work at a small studio because I knew I'd be learning so much. Like I knew I would do everything, and I did. And I worked there for 4 years. And I swear, like, I think that was 8-9 years of work experience somewhere else. You know, like when I started, the studio was 4 people. We were working out of my boss's live workspace. By the time I was done working there, we were 10 people. We had our own, like we had a big office. Like I grew from being a junior designer starting out to a senior designer level, like incredibly quickly, because like there was no room to be a junior designer there. Like we had to do everything all the time. Like it was basically like, how fast can you level up? Because that's what the studio needed. The pace was quick. Like I got to work on everything. I did branding projects. I designed a 300-page book. I did packaging projects. I, you know, worked on web stuff. I, you know, almost immediately was in charge of the largest account at the studio for Marriott hotels, doing all of their stuff. Like we would work with like really cool small businesses in addition to those kinds of big clients who were like, you know, doing their first ever branding. And we would do, you know, the strategy for those clients, the branding for them. Like I, you know, we didn't have a project manager. So like, I would be the project manager. I'd be client facing. I would help with business development, pricing, estimates. Like that was huge when I went out onto my own, because my next step after the studio was you said in my bio, like I was a creative entrepreneur. I ran my own business for a few years. Like being able to have the insight into how a studio ran, how, you know, we priced things, how we wrote estimates, like that was huge. Like the knowledge and experience that I gained working there was just like, it was incredible. I loved that job.
I totally feel that.
How about you? You also had like a really cool out of school experience.
Very Okay, so I didn't have an actual official job after school. Because I just launched our studio. The reason for that was very particular, and I had the opportunity to do two internships while I was at Algonquin. So the first one was offered to me by actually one of our teachers directly after the first year, which was wild. That was very, very crazy because it was first year. Nobody was getting jobs. So that was very fun. And that was also, it was a very small studio. There was, I think it was 6 of us at the time. Little studio in Ottawa called Cinnamon Toast. We all sat together, the owner, the project manager, the two senior designers, another junior designer, and then myself, the little intern who was like, all right, here we go kind of thing, and just like being able to witness everything and like listening to all the conversations and like participating in the client pitches, on the like portfolio development, like helping them put together RFPs, like all these things that again you don't really get too much exposure to, especially when you're starting when you're just starting the career, because I think you're just kind of like starting to learn the basics of graphics. You're not even going into the business side of things yet. I knew that I wanted to start my own business eventually. That was kind of like, I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Myself and Jared, who eventually ended up being my business partner, we kind of, we were both had gone to school together, kind of being like, oh, let's do some. We thought we were just going to be, whatever, like a small little practice kind of thing. Ended up being like a pretty cool studio, but that was kind of like the initial. And so right after that experience, like after first year, we started freelancing, and we freelanced our butts off through the 2 years that followed. And so by the time we graduated, we had a really good roster of clients. We had ended up doing, like through nature of doing some work for my mom, as you do. We got connected to a web development agency that really loved the work that we did. So they ended up kind of like getting us to be their little design arm. And so we were just in full gear. And it was a wild couple of years because during school, we were, doing school full time. I was working at Starbucks. We had a few hours actually at school at the Student Support Services office. Like we just would support with like promos and posters and so on. And we were doing SALT, or what would eventually be SALT, like almost full time. So we didn't really sleep and we had no social life. But it's kind of, that's the time to do it. Yeah. I don't think that I would put myself through that again now. But it was really good prep. And so by the time I graduated, like I said, to my second internship, which was the co-op program, was with another small studio. And it was kind of the same deal. Like people were like, why don't you go to a bigger studio? Like maybe get, like more experience. And I don't know, maybe I think I would have gotten more experience from like the art direction side of things. Somebody really like nitpicking and grilling my work, and definitely, that would have been value as well. But like I said, I had that entrepreneurial bug. I wanted to start my studio. And we had a relationship with Robert Smith, who's also a teacher at Algonquin, became a mentor for us and is to this. But we did my second co-op, Jared's first, but we did our co-op at Green Melon, his packaging studio. And again, it was just like amazing exposure into like every single bit about the business. There were 5 of us there, Jared and I shared a desk. That desk ended up being where SALT was born from, because when we graduated, Rob, who is an extremely generous person with his knowledge, was like, if you guys want to start the business here, like just keep working out of this desk, essentially, like you can start the studio here.
So cool. And
so the first 3 months of SALT were us in a little IKEA white table, and front side by side, kind of like working on our laptops. And after our 3rd month, we were able to afford our first studio space.
That's cool.
And then just kicked off the studio. And so it was just we threw ourselves into the fire. Like I remember at that time we used to say, like, we say yes to everything and we will figure it out later, kind of thing. It was just pick up as much as you can, learn. Like I talk a lot about how, during our first year, I think we changed our contract 21 times,
Wow.
and our questionnaire like another much, because you just had to keep, every project was a learning experience. We got screwed a few like, you know, we screwed ourselves in a way. And like, I know we're going to talk about our mistakes a little bit later on. But yeah, we made a lot of mistakes. That meant that we learned a lot and quickly. And I think part of just like being receptive to that, to those changes and to those challenges and those opportunities more than anything else, meant that we very quickly kind of like started forming the type of relationships that we wanted to form with our clients, and started getting the type of work that we wanted to be getting, and that was wonderful. So yeah, all that to say, my first job out of school was just it was crazy. It was a crazy, wonderful adventure with a lot of learning. And it prepared me for ultimately being able to, you know, like when I was ready to say, okay, well, you know, we've closed this chapter of our lives and we're going on to a different job. And it's not that it's a fully closed chapter, because health is very much still a thing, and we're doing work together, just with a lesser capacity. We kind of entered the world of senior design with a full toolbox under our belt. You know, like you and I have entered Shopify not just as designers, working constantly under an art director, but like the creative directors, art directors, sales people, we've had to wear all of the hats. And it's been a very fun process, and a challenging one, because that has also meant that I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but like I think we've had to take a lot of ownership over specifically our like, when I'm talking about design itself, about the creative arsenal that we bring, because we still needed to keep our skills up to par, like constantly be researching, constantly be looking at the trends and like seeking critique from others.
Picking up new technology.
I
mean, on that note, like, so let's go a little more rapid fire, because I know we want to get to questions. So like on that note, like what's your, you know, favorite and least favorite parts about being a designer or being, you know, a creative person for your career?
Totally. Well, my favorite part is what I get to do. I mean, I tell people sometimes, I'm like, I get to make pretty things for a living. Like, sometimes I describe, you know, at Shopify, I'm like, I get, you know, my job is to make things that make people enjoy their work. I'm like, how freaking lucky is that? Like, I feel, I consider myself very lucky and like privileged to be able to like to do this kind of work, to make amazing to make pretty things for a living. It's awesome. I freaking enjoy it. I love being able to finish a work, and you know, even though it's a struggle to get there, sometimes you finish something and you're like, you can sit back and be like, oh, man, that looks good. Like, feel good about it.
I made that.
Yeah, I made that. I'm like, yeah. And then you see it out there in the world, right? Like people wear it, people make it their own, whatever else. So that's an amazing part of it. Challenging part is the creative blocks, the self-doubt, because alongside, you know, like a lot of creativity is also trusting yourself. We touch so much of our own work just by being like, oh shit, and you know, pardon the language, but you know, you say, oh, this isn't good, and you stop it even before it sees the light of day, or you don't start at all. Like so often, like especially with the my less, you know, when I work on more kind of like artsy personal stuff versus like on a brief, you know, kind of graphic designy stuff, I'm like, nobody wants to see this. Like, why am I going to make, like, why is my painting any better than anybody else's? Or why is it, you know, like, I struggle a lot with the self-doubt side of things. I think everybody does, but, you know, it's particularly challenging when you're putting so much of your own, you know, care. You put so much of your own self into your work. Exactly. So that is, I guess, my least favorite part, is the self-doubt that comes with it and how tied it is to your actual output. But when it does come out and you push through it, it is a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with that. Like, I think my favorite part about being a designer is just getting to do a thing that I love. You know, like I have so many friends who work in jobs that they're like, it's a job, like it's fine, whatever, it pays the bills. I'm not that crazy about it. But like, I love my job. I love what I do for a living. It's so lucky to be able to say that. Like, I love, you know, I get to do work that I feel really excited about for a living, and I get to always learn, and I get to be creative all the time. I think the flip side of that is that you have to be creative all the time, and sometimes that can be really hard. Like if you're experiencing creative block, or you just like wake up one day and you're like, I don't feel like this, like I just don't have any ideas today. And like that happens. Like you can't be creative 8 hours a day. It's just, I don't think our brains are wired that way. But it's hard when you have a deadline and you have to think of stuff and you have to produce. And I think that can be really challenging. And I think like, you know, talking about the self-doubt piece too, like that's a big one for me. Like I have anxiety, and like I think that can crop up a lot, especially in like our world of Pinterest and Instagram and Dribble, where you're constantly looking at other people's work and feeling like it can be very easy sometimes to fall into a mindset of feeling like your work doesn't measure up, or you know, other people's stuff is always going to be better, or, you know, what's, like you said, sort of what's the point. I think for me, when I was a freelancer, that was something I found very isolating and difficult, because not having somebody to like bounce things off of and get that outside eye, that validation or critique sometimes, like, you know, it's equally important to have somebody to look at your work and be like, you could make it better. Like here's some ideas, and get yourself out of that rut. So which is one of the things like I love about like being able to work at Shopify with you, is like we are constantly like bouncing things back and forth, playing off each other. I think it makes my work a lot better, and I think it keeps me a little bit from going to those places of like comparison and self-doubt, to like work with someone else. But that can be a really hard part of the career, and I think it's like important to, as creatives, to try and like be a bit kind to ourselves and be gentle with ourselves when you are in those moods, like that they will pass. But I think you kind of just have to keep doing it. Like the like, I think we actually might run out of time, so we might not get to that question. But like, I think it's, you know, sometimes you'll see that quote, like 90% of talent is just showing up. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
Like you just got to show up every day and keep doing it. And sometimes you make work you really like, and sometimes you don't. But if you make enough of it, you have enough work that you like, you know, like you get better all the time. And that's something that also I really find motivating to think about my career. Like you don't get worse. Like you don't get worse the more design you make. You always get better. Like that's cool. Like that's really cool sometimes to think about, oh my God, like I wonder what I'm going to be doing a year from now. Like what kind of cool work am I going to be doing a year from now? Because it's going to be better than what I do now. It's not possible for it to be worse. So sometimes when I feel sort of doubtful about my own abilities, that's what I think. And it helps.
Totally. No, I can get behind that. And just like, the amount of times that we pulled each other out of like a space of like, like, I don't know if it's any good. And then you show someone else and they're like, oh no, this is actually awesome. Just do this and this and kind of thing. And you're like, oh, okay. Like this is going somewhere. I'm into that. I'm with you. I realized that we actually have a lot of questions left, and there's only like 10 minutes left for us to speak. So
we just are having too much fun chatting.
Should we talk a little about kind of like the best and like the pros and cons of being an entrepreneur versus having the big job? Just
the big job. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, I can talk a little bit, and then I'll kick it over to you. So, sure. I mean, things I loved about being a creative entrepreneur, like I loved and will always love, like maybe this is something I'll do again in future. Like I loved the feeling of building a business. Like I don't even know how to explain it. Like it wasn't the making money. It wasn't it was just like being able to realize like, oh, like I made a living this year and I did it on my own. Like every project I worked on, like I did that. I don't know how to even explain it. Like you just, when you have your own business, like you feel like the highs are so high, the lows are also so low, but like you really feel like you like are earning every day of your career. Like you are making it happen for yourself. It's really empowering. Like that is really exciting as an entrepreneur. It can also be incredibly lonely and hard. I found it really, really hard to switch off at the end of the day, which is something I love about my job working for the man. I mean, Shopify is a great company to work for. And I certainly can't speak to other workplaces because I'm sure some of them are not as good work-life balance wise, but like I can switch off at the end of the day now. It's 5. I turn on my Switch, I play Zelda, and I don't think about work anymore. And it's great. I would have never been able to do that, you know, in my entrepreneurial career. So That's really nice. And I do think we get to work on some like really fun stuff, the resources available to us as well in a big company too. Like, you know, we can connect with developers. We have incredible learning opportunities. The budgets for projects are larger, which enables us to do some really fun stuff. I can't say there's like, you know, one specifically that I like better than the other. I think they've both been great experiences for me. How about you, Danny?
I'm going to second basically every single thing you said, to save ourselves some time to go to the next question. But yeah, I mean, the sense of ownership, the sense of pride that comes with owning and building your business, the constant problem solving was wonderful for me. I mean, I really enjoyed even like, you know, developing the skill of like organizing our timetable for projects and like being able to like measure out, okay, how much time do I need to assign to this? And just like every day was a new and fresh challenge. And I don't know if it's my ADHD talking or my particular personality type, but like that constant variety and newness that was inevitable with the type of business that we were having, specifically being design, you're constantly being faced with, you know, new briefs, new challenges, so on. But then also the fact that it was an entrepreneurship and that entrepreneurship at a formal level, you know, other than the rickety business that I might have done in high school, was wonderful. It was just a very welcome challenge, a very rewarding challenge, and definitely something that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. And yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, having the big job, the benefits, the extra budget, the time, like all of those things is just it's also just wonderful. Very sometimes it can be a stressful job. It can also, there's a relaxation that comes with like not having to worry about like, oh my god, I didn't invoice that person, like I need to do, you know, HR stuff that you're like you know nothing about and you're having to figure it out, and all the additional stress that comes with running the business is alleviated, and that's awesome. Yeah,
like the institutional support. I wonder, I'm looking at our like run of show, I'm wondering if we should open it up to questions now, because we end in about 10 minutes. So if anybody's got any questions, we would love to answer your questions, and you can feel free to drop them in the chat.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you so much. You guys are doing fantastic. We do have a couple questions. So I will throw it to both of you because you both have similar but different backgrounds. So it's actually coming from a student in advertising. And she was wondering if you have any tips or advice to give an aspiring student to start a business in the area of graphic design or advertising.
Can I tackle that first, Marissa?
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, hang on. I'm just looking at the question again. I need to always read it. Honestly, like my biggest advice, and this is going to be probably really different than yours, Danny, because I know you started a business straight out of school. Mm-hmm. My advice would be to work somewhere else first and absorb like all the knowledge you probably can. That's it. Like people give advice based on their own career experiences. So I'm basically just giving you my own career experiences, and maybe Danny will give you a different one, but that would be my number one advice. Like, I think starting a business is an awesome thing to do. Like I would always advocate for that. And I think it's like such an amazing, rewarding experience. For me, it was incredibly valuable to work somewhere else that was kind of the type of business that I wanted to do, that was doing the kind of work that I wanted to do. So, you know, like, and then be able to take what you've learned there and apply it. Because I think it does help you get past some of the trial and error and struggles at the beginning. You know, like for me, I had knowledge of writing estimates. I had documents I could take with me. I had things that I developed while I was working somewhere else, and got to do a little bit of that trial and error there where I had more support. I think possibly if you had like a business partner like Danny, like maybe that would be different because you'd have the support from another person, but starting a business on your own can be really tough. So that would be my advice. I think it's a really valuable learning experience to work somewhere else first and then go into business for yourself. What do you think, Danny?
I'm not going to refute that at all. I mean, I don't think that I would have had the confidence to start the business as I did had I not had the previous experiences working in studio. And so to that, I will say whether you're able to secure an internship, secure a job, even if it's, you know, for a part, you know, gearing you up to having the business, or getting yourself a mentor, like just having someone that is willing to share the knowledge with you, like critique your work, offer advice, all that kind of thing is super, super valuable. Just having that, like, the resource of knowledge and accountability as well. But beyond that, I mean, when it actually starts coming to the logistics of starting a business, is be real with yourself in terms of money. Like, that's huge. It's like, do you have enough in your savings to sustain you if you don't get any clients in the next few months? Are you going to need a part-time job in the meantime to sustain that? Maybe something that doesn't drain your brain, but like pays bills kind of thing.
Yep.
Are you, where is your portfolio at relative to the other available studios in the city? What are they charging? What should you be charging based on your experience? Like, just very pragmatic questions that you need to ask yourself. Do you have the who can you reach out to when you're first starting off to kick off? Because the first thing is just blast your friends and like be like your family and be like, I've got this business, like please hook me up with clients kind of thing. And it's like, do you have enough people to sustain you? So just like being very realistic about the numbers, and just the logic of life is very good at the beginning. And also, to tie in the whole job and entrepreneurship side, also ask yourself, how you want that business to grow and whether you're going to be happy 5 years from now that you did start that business, even if that means that maybe you didn't make as much money as if you ended up joining a company. Does it tie into how you want to lead your life? Are you willing to make the sacrifices? And just basically, I think a lot of it is just like being supremely honest with yourself about all those kind of decisions, and making a well-informed choice into going into business. I would recommend, even if you don't get like a design job at the beginning or an advertising job at the beginning, at the very least, like knowing that you can pay the bills is incredibly stress relieving. A more punctual piece of feedback, there is a book called Freelance and Business Advice. It's Fabas by Hoodba Studio. I might tag someone else to find in the link if you all don't mind. It's a phenomenal book by a studio called Hoodba out of California. These two super cool twins, I always admired them, and like kind of it's one of the studios that I was like, I want to be like them thing, and they've published this sort of workbook / knowledge book called Fabas, and it is phenomenal. It follows a lot of the same advice that we kind of inadvertently followed as we were starting our business, but it walks you through everything from like, calculating your hourly rate to calculating what you'd like, your yearly income to be, how to talk to clients, how to pitch your projects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure there are many others that are phenomenal out there, but that one in particular was one that I found very well presented and very easy to follow. So I would check it out.
That's awesome. And I saw that the link was just dropped in the chat there, so definitely check it out. Thank you. Those were some great tips, lots to absorb there. I think we have time for one more question. And this question, they're a little bit more curious about what you do at Shopify, and if you can share a little bit more about the projects that you get to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I can take that. The first bit of that one is, so Danny and I both work on the same team. We work on the employee experience team on a sub team called Internal Solutions. Basically what we work on is design that is internally focused within the company, specific for like our audience is other employees at Shopify. So we work on everything related to the employee experience, specifically on projects that are related to employee appreciation, employee surprise, delight. So we work on everything from, employee onboarding and exit experiences, like how are you, like, what's the experience like when you first come into the company? We take it from a visual design perspective. So we also work on things like employee merch. We work on, like Danny recently did some awesome branding for the Halloween costume contest at Shopify. So we work on like basically all kinds of things for employee experience. I'm trying to think of like some fun things we've worked on lately. Like right now we're designing a really cool set of postcards. We're a very international company. We're designing a really cool set of postcards that people will be able to basically like collect when they go to meetings in different countries. What else, Danny?
Oh my goodness.
I know. I'm like, what do we?
Yeah, like, oh,
We work on so much
it's so
stuff.
hard to come up with a list of projects on the spot.
I know.
But yeah, it's been a really wide range too, because we've supported on so many different like initiatives that take place towards employee engagement and participate. We work on the onboarding kits, so like the kit that you get when you first join Shopify, like all the we think help strategize the little gifts and mix and acts that are going to come in there, but we also help design those. Any supporting materials, the box itself, the cards, like all the little odds and ends.
Yeah.
We're also kind of spearheading the logistics, well, not the logistics themselves, but the creative logistics behind an intro store that we're going to be running with merch for other shop folks. So just how, creating products that both look good and people want to wear, display, use, whatever it may be, but that also helps connect actual company missions. So like obviously Shopify is all about supporting merchants, and so we want to create products that help the people who work there support those merchants, so source them from them, or create like
cool collaboration
that collab things that actually connect them to the merchants. So just like thinking in terms of things that are going to make people feel good about working there, and also that are going to support the people that we serve.
Yep. We also do branding as well for like internal programs, internal conferences, things like that. So it's really a little bit of a lot of things. It's pretty fun.
So that sounds like so much fun to spend your days doing that.
It's very fun.
We are just about out of time, so I'll let you both, if you have any final words or comments that you'd like to share with our group today, take it away.
Do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. I mean, I think like one thing we didn't get to touch on today too, like we talked a lot about design, but I would say like my biggest piece of like advice on how to be a successful designer, like my biggest takeaway from my career is like there's a lot to be said for, and I think any career, like I think there's just a lot to be said for being kind of working hard. Like you can have the best work in the world, but if you're like not pleasant to work with, nobody's going to want to hire you. And I think like being enjoyable to work with really, in my experience, has opened a lot of doors in my career. And the other thing too, I think as from designers to, I'm sure there's other designers on this call, like being generous with our knowledge as designers, I think is really important. Like, I think gatekeeping trade secrets is something that really like hurts our design community. Like talk about your process, share your pricing, show how you made things, like share clients with other designers. Like, I think it just makes the industry so much better and like so much fun to be a part of. So
big plus ones on all of that. And to actually not counter, but like to add to the whole idea of being nice, because I 100% believe that firmly. And like, it's so pleasant to be able to work with other nice humans. Learn how to say no. And that doesn't mean that you're not being nice at all. You just are being nice to yourself as well as the other person, because that is the hugest hurdle as a designer, especially when you're first starting off. You want to get clients, you want people to like you, and so on and so forth, and so you say yes and yes, and the problem is that then people get used to that yes, and so when you actually need to say no, because hey, you can't afford to live if you keep doing work for free or changes for free or whatever else it may be, where you need to hike up your price or whatever it may be, then even though it might seem like the absolute correct thing to do, you can get some negative reactions from people who are just like used to, you bending over backwards, and that's not nice either. So learning how to say no, how to set boundaries, how to explain why those boundaries are set in a very just like logical, like I'm not, this is not to be mean, this is just how it works, is a super important skill, and very worth developing.
Yeah, totally agree. And if anybody has any other questions, like I'm sure you can contact either of us. Like we're both on Instagram, and you can email us. Our contact info is in the chat. So please feel free. Yeah. If there's anything we didn't get to.
Awesome. Well, once again, a huge thank you to you both for joining us today. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. So by all means, if anyone wants to follow up with Danny and Marissa, please grab their contact information in the chat. And like they said, they'd be happy to talk with you. Our next third Thursday will be coming up in February, so be sure to check that out. This event was recorded if you wish to watch it again or share with anyone in your networks. Thank you so much, Danny and Marissa, for joining us today, and have a great third Thursday, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.